Okay, picture this. You're back in high school, your teacher assigns this massive essay and gives you one full month to write it. Sounds super generous, right? But what actually happens? If you're anything like the rest of us, you spend the first 28 days playing video games, scrolling on your phone, and just completely ignoring the whole thing. Then, 2 days before it's due, the panic sets in. That looming deadline acts like a fire alarm, instantly stripping away every single distraction. You sit down, you lock in, and you manage to crank out the entire paper in just those final 48 hours. And honestly, you probably still got a pretty solid grade. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're decoding the invisible psychological force that dictates why that high school essay took a whole month when it really only required 2 days of actual work. It's a phenomenon that governs our daily procrastination and that endless need for perfectionism. By the end of This Explainer, you aren't just going to understand why tasks drag on forever. You'll be walking away with an actionable toolkit of hacks to master your time and basically rewrite the rules of your own productivity.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the expansion of work, dive into its origins, see how it impacts your space and money, look at the cost of complacency, and finally, how to beat the law.
All right, Section 1, the expansion of work. Why tasks take forever. Let's dive right in. The rule governing this whole behavior is known as Parkinson's law. It states, work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Think about writing a quick letter. If someone gives you 10 minutes to write a letter, you'll grab a pen, scribble it down, and boom, you're done. 10-minute task. But give yourself an artificial deadline of 10 p.m. tonight, suddenly you decide you need a shower first. Then you spend an hour hunting for the absolute perfect pen, another hour finding the ideal paper, and hours just overthinking the wording. By 10 p.m., the letter is done. It's the exact same letter. But one took 10 minutes and the other took 10 hours. It turns out work literally stretches to fill whatever container you put it in. So if you allocate 2 hours for a task, you're going to see a burst of really high consolidated effort. But if you give yourself 3 hours or even 8 hours for that exact same task, you aren't actually doing more work. You're just taking that concentrated effort and diluting it over time. With an 8-hour deadline, you put in a tiny bit of effort up front and then massive amounts of dead time, just waiting around, over-preparing, procrastinating. The takeaway here? A later deadline doesn't yield better work. It just yields more unnecessary padding. Which brings us to this brilliant little spin-off called the Stock-Sanford corollary. If you wait until the last minute, it only takes a minute to do. Think of a deadline like a fire. When a fire is small and far away, you kind of just ignore it, right? But when that fire is about to burn your house down, you don't casually check your email for 10 minutes. No way. You grab a bucket and you put it out immediately. Looming deadlines strip away all the trivial stuff and basically force you to execute.
Moving to Section 2, Origins of the Law, Bureaucracy and the British Navy.
So, where did this actually come from? It was coined by a British naval historian named C. Northcote Parkinson. Back in 1955, he wrote a satirical essay for The Economist based on his time in the British Civil Service. And people resonated with it so deeply that by 1958, he actually expanded it into a best-selling book. What's amazing is just how universal this concept is. Fast forward to 1986, and it was being quoted by world leaders. Literally, when an Italian politician was complaining about swelling bureaucracy, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev just smiled and said Parkinson's law works everywhere.
But the really crucial point here is the actual data Parkinson found to back up his joke. He analyzed the British Admiralty and the Colonial Office and discovered that their administrative staff was growing by an astonishing 5 to 7% every single year. But here is the punchline, and it is genuinely baffling. This staff increase was happening while the actual number of Navy ships and British colonies was drastically declining. Less real work to do, but a 5 to 7% increase in staff to do it. Parkinson deduced that two main forces were driving this bizarre growth. First, officials want to multiply subordinates, not rivals. Meaning, if an administrator feels overworked, they don't hire an equal to share the load. They hire two subordinates. And then eventually those subordinates hire their own subordinates. Second, officials make work for each other. They send memos, hold a meeting to discuss the memo, and then require approvals for the meeting. And hey, this happens in companies today. If a project is due next month, a company might throw 10 people on it and drag it out for 30 days. But if it's an emergency, due tomorrow, 3 people will magically knock it out in one day.
Section 3, Beyond Time, Space and Money. The Universal Expansion. Now let's look at how this law bleeds into your other resources. First up, the law of money. Spending expands to fill the level of your income. When you get a raise, you don't usually just bank the entire difference, right? Your lifestyle inflates. If you have the cushion, your appetite for stuff just kind of eats into it. Next is the law of spatial erosion. Stuff expands to take up the space available for storage. Say you move from a cramped apartment into a bigger house, thinking you'll finally have some empty space. Give it a year. I guarantee you Parkinson's law dictates that those extra rooms and larger closets will magically fill up with brand new clutter. Section 4. The cost of complacency, triviality, and shared inefficiency. This brings us to one of Parkinson's most famous corollaries, the law of triviality. He stated that the time spent on any agenda item is inversely proportional to the money involved. Today, people usually call this bike shedding. Parkinson painted this picture of a committee that would instantly rubber stamp a massive, highly complex budget for a multi-million-dollar nuclear reactor, just because nobody really understood it. But then, that same committee would spend hours agonizing over the tiny budget and the exact paint color of the employee bike shed outside. Why? Because everyone has an opinion on what a bike shed should look like. When we aren't constrained, we waste massive amounts of time on trivial details. And this ties directly into the law of shared inefficiency. Imagine a store or a team is having a slow day, and you have 4 workers putting in about 80% effort each to keep things running. Well, if you add a 5th worker to that exact same workload, the total effort doesn't go up. Instead, Parkinson's law kicks in. The work expands, and now everyone just drops their individual effort down to 60%. Throwing extra people at a slow task doesn't help. It just breeds a culture of complacency. Also, if you let time and effort stretch out without giving clear direction, you're going to run right into the law of communication. Parkinson noted that the void created by the failure to communicate is soon filled with poison, drivel, and misrepresentation. Basically, when expectations are vague or deadlines are a bit too soft, you leave this empty space. And human nature being what it is, people will eagerly fill that space with their own interpretations, which, let's be honest, are usually wrong. Finally, Section 5, How to Beat the Law, Your Productivity Toolkit. So how do we actually fix this? Author and productivity expert Brian Tracy outlines 5 highly effective steps to reverse engineer this law. First, set specific time-bound goals. You need to know exactly what you want to achieve. Second, define the project's scope. Reverse engineer the actual pieces required to hit that goal, keeping the end in mind. Next, pre-plan for issues. Create a buffer by brainstorming potential obstacles up front. Then, create a strict timeline. Break those big tasks into small ones and assign firm, tight deadlines to every single piece. And finally, ruthlessly eliminate time wasters. Constantly review your actions. If a task isn't pushing your timeline forward, like answering some irrelevant email or scrolling social media, just cut it out entirely. Okay, let's lock in some rapid-fire, high-energy daily life hacks. First, create an artificial deadline. If your boss says a report is due Friday, make your personal deadline Wednesday. Simple as that. Second, time box your work. Restrict your available hours to force deep focus and kill the padding. Third, if you are completely stuck on a big project, try the 1-hour rush challenge. Give yourself a wildly unreasonable deadline, like drafting an entire essay in 1 single hour. It is not going to be perfect, but it absolutely shatters the procrastination cycle and gets words on the page. Finally, if you work a standard job, pretend you literally have to clock out early at 10 a.m. Front-load your tasks with absolute urgency. You will be completely shocked at how much you accomplish when you mentally shrink your day. We've seen how work, money, and our stuff will happily expand to consume absolutely every inch of freedom we give them. The secret to success here isn't waiting for some external pressure to force you to perform. It's about building your own boundaries. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Look at your calendar right now. What deadline are you going to artificially shorten today? Take back your time, and I'll see you in the next explainer.